Shalom, shalom, family. Um, so recently there's this doctrine out. I like to call it esoteric um, doctrine or knowledge, but it consists of the notion that the Messiah was the serpent in the garden, right? And there's some truth to that, to the garden situation and the serpent, the Father, and the Messiah, right? Now, this doctrine, knowledge, esoteric knowledge, or whatever, because obviously they so-called have information that backs this belief. Um, I say it's not true. Um, it's not true. It's not biblical. It's not scriptural, right? Hence is why their backup to support this doctrine is that the scriptures has been tampered with, right? So now with that, which that always leaves gray area. That gray area is the opportunity to imply and apply this interpretation or apply this doctrine, right? So I say that there's some truth to it. Wow, really some truth to it. Really? The Messiah, Yeshua, Yahushua, Yahawashai, Jesus the Christ. All right? Because I know that's going on right now. Everybody wants to get the name right. This whole spirit or vibe to just like everybody wants to talk about names now in languages. At first it kind of died down, but now it's back, and somebody added something had added fuel to the flame of that. So now everybody wants to get the name right, whether it's Yeshaya, Yesha, or some of the Bantu translations of that name, whatever, right? The Messiah, right? The Son of the Creator. He was there in the garden. Yeah, he was. Really. There was a warning, and someone was trying to protect. So the Yahushua, the Messiah, was trying to protect Adam and Eve, right? Adonai and Kaya, right? But it wasn't the serpent. The serpent has always been the serpent family. Always. Hasatan. Always been the serpent. The serpent has always been Hasatan. So who was the Messiah and where was he? He was Elua. He was Elohim. He was God. He was the Father in the flesh. He was the one that warned and told Adonai and Chaya. Remember, the Father what? Never leaves his throne, right? He always has a what? An intercessor, an avatar on the earth. What? Remember the scriptures? No one has seen the Father. So the Messiah was the Father, Elua, or God, if we go to the biblical text right in Genesis, warning them not to what? Partake in, or to partake in the understanding or the mental state of knowledge of good and evil. Why? Because we know what was going on during that time. Obviously, during that time, the world was in chaos. We know that chaos, or where it says void, that's what it means in the Hebrew. It means chaos, dysfunction. So when the garden was created, Adam and Eve, when they was protected by the cherubims, they were protected by the war that was going outside of the garden. The dysfunction that was outside of the garden. What is the dysfunction? This same dysfunction that's in Genesis is prophesied in Isaiah 61 or 60. If I'm not mistaken, that the world be the same word is the world will be covered in darkness. That same Hebrew word is the same word that says void in Genesis chapter 1. So the Messiah was protecting them, not from the Father, which is this doctrine alleges that the Messiah was trying to protect Adam and Eve from Yah or Yahweh or whatever. No, he was protecting them from what was going on. It was the battle that's been going on since the very beginning. The war against the flesh and the spirit. It's always been going on, family. That's what he was protecting them of. This is why you know it's spiritual. Because the war was outside of the garden. But how did it get inside? The garden was protected by cherubims. Right? And they're like, how did the serpent get in there? Well, didn't it say he was subtle of all the beasts of the field? Doesn't the scripture say that Hasatan could transform into an angel of light? So don't get caught up in the weak notion that the serpent was the Messiah. What? No. The Messiah was trying to warn them again, just like he did when he came back to warn men, Adamah, men, Chaya, and women, right? Men, the war that is going on in your heart and your mind and your spirit. The knowledge of the good, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil gave Chaya and Adamah the option to do evil. Because what? That's why he said, the knowledge of good and evil. You don't need to know what evil is, because why? You will commit evil. If a man yada's evil in the scripture, in the Hebrew, what does that mean? You have been acquainted. You have been intimate. Yada, no, evil. There's no way you can yada something and not be acquainted and intimate with it. So the Messiah, the Father, just like he did then and now, was trying to warn Chaya and Adamah, Adam and Eve, not to know and to be acquainted with wickedness and dysfunction, iniquity, because it defiled them. Once they took partaking of that knowledge, of that fruit, right? They became knowledgeable that it was a war. That's one. What is the war, family? The scriptures don't say that when they partook in the knowledge of the good and evil, it said, yeah, it will make you gods, right? It will give you power. It did give them power. What's the scripture say? Elohim makes them gods. It will give them power, right? That's what it means. That's what the Hebrew, right? That's what it means, right? Guess what it gave power? Not the spirit, family. It gave their flesh power. Because sin only is fed. Sin leads to death, right? And sin only benefits what? The flesh. That's why in Romans it says that what? Or Romans chapter 7. It says that the flesh cannot give pleasure to the Father, right? Paraphrasing. Right? That the flesh cannot please the Father. It is at enmity with the Father. That's why it says the law, the Torah, is spiritual. So it gave power to their flesh. So what does that mean? So in the war between your spirit and flesh, knowing what sin is, knowing that you have an option to commit fornication, and not giving your flesh the experience of like, oh man, I could have sex with another woman and get the same feeling or better than my wife. And even if that woman's somebody else's wife, it's family, y'all got to get this. This doctrine is right again. It's the same thing over and over and over and over again. It's distracting you from what is really going on. And it's the war between the spirit and the flesh, family. I know who some of the people that knows this doctrine, right? I saw this doctrine on social media, right? It's robbing us, Israel. It's robbing us, family. It's robbing us, Mishpachah. It's robbing men again from overcoming and conquering the war that's going on the inside. The garden was protected. But somehow, the war was still going on inside the garden. The Malachim was guarding the garden, Eden. But somehow, it got into the minds of men. That's one thing they didn't understand. The Father knew this, and he was warning them. But what it was showing was what Romans says, that Hamashiach made foolish the things of the flesh. He made foolish of that. Because the flesh is weak. The Father knew this. That's why he warned them. But he knew that they would fail. This would make the Father who he is. But this is why Yahushua came down and says the Father walked in the garden calling out for Adam and Eve. He was trying to warn them again. He wasn't protecting. The serpent wasn't protecting Adumah and Kaya. What? He wasn't protecting Adam. He wasn't protecting Adam and Eve from the Father. He was protecting from something that Father already ordained on the earth. And what is that? The Father is what? The creator of good and evil. He already ordained the function of the world. The Messiah was just warning them that, and that's trying to let them understand. This is why Torah is so important, because Torah is the blueprint of how to avoid the destruction to avoid the dysfunction or avoid the judgment of the Father that he already set on the earth. He gives life and death, remember? So it was a warning. This is why it's a blessing to know the Torah, because those who don't understand how the world functions. This is why someone could, and again, we can go back to fornication. That's what's popping on my mind. Fornication. So why somebody that can commit fornication with so many women and have so many issues going on with them, whether it's sexual transmitted diseases or whether it's mental dysfunction and spiritual dysfunction, right? Because we know what that brings to someone that is continually fornicating. We know what that brings. Covetousness. We know what that brings when someone continues to desire something that is not theirs and they cannot afford. We know that because of Torah. This is why Paul said, I would not know what sin is if it wasn't for the Torah. It is a blessing. Yahushua told them to eat of the tree of life, which is Torah, to continue to do the right things and not the tree of knowledge of good and evil, because that will give you, the desires of the flesh. It gave them power. The serpent wasn't lying, but he was. What did he do? He tricked Eve. Her curiosity was to what? Do the desires of her flesh. To give her flesh power, because her spirit already had the power, because they were eating from the tree of life. But it was her flesh, and that's a different story. That's another one. That's another topic. So this doctrine is nothing, family. It's going to come and go. The people that's promoting this doctrine, the teachers or the mores, not even the so-called mores or the so-called prophets or the so-called whoever they are, whatever they say that they are, it's going to come and go. All it's going to do is just snatch some more of the sheep. But at the same time, though, when you think about it, it's meant to do that. Those who are going to believe that are supposed to believe it. And that is a hard pill to swallow. And that's truth. That's real truth. So I'm done. I hope you have ears to hear and eyes to see. Shalom, family.